Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Women of the West Indies with me, your host, Vernaire Bass. Today, I am so happy to be sitting down with the beautiful Melissa Noel, the founder and chief creative officer of Mel&N Media and the contributing news and politics editor for Essence magazine. How are you this afternoon, Mel?
I am doing fantastic. And I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And what a fantastic program that you have to just feature some amazing women across the West Indies who are doing magnificent things. So I'm just really honored to be here.
And it's an absolute privilege to have you on the show. So if you guys tuned in last week, I was actually sitting down with the traveling island girl, Roselle Celestina. So make sure you check out the episode as well. And just give us a quick minute and we'll be right back. So, Mel, you are over there in the beautiful New York City. How's everything in New York at the moment?
You know, it is hot. But besides that, I think for me, summer is just on the move. I feel like there's been so many events. I'm trying to keep up. I'm trying to get to New York, has so many things going on at once that I'm like, do I have enough time to get to everything? But I'm trying my best. And of course, Buju is having his Long Walk to Freedom tour back in New York City after 15 years. This will be the first performance he has in New York City. So one happened on Saturday. I get to enjoy one this evening, and I'm excited about that. No place like New York to have Buju Banton and kind of, make that mark back on American soil with the music.
That's fantastic. And I know that, I've been stalking you on Instagram and I knew that you was at the Essence, the Essence Fest looking absolutely fabulous. So how was that event for you?
Essence Fest, this was my third year, working Essence Fest. And it was, I'm trying to still find the words to really sum up and describe how great it felt. This year, I got to, in addition to being a contributing editor at Essence, I served as the editorial stage lead for the Global Black Economic Forum and Essence Authors. I also was a moderator for the Essence Film Festival, where I got to sit down with Caribbean and African film commissioners and filmmakers for the Cultural Connection series. So it was super busy. There was so much going on. You can imagine someone like me running around a convention center from stage to speak to authors, to speak to filmmakers, to speak to newsmakers. So it was super, super busy. And Essence Fest is a major, massive undertaking that literally, once one ends, the next one starts. So I was just really grateful that my VP of content, saw it fit for me to lead those stages and to be able to, have those experiences, lead a team, work with the team. And I would say there's nothing quite like seeing things that you've worked on for months, things that you've written, ideas that you've had, and you work to, bring them together to actually see it on a stage like Essence Fest. I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude, so excited. And I had the time of my life, as I always do, seeing Usher, Janet Jackson,
Wow.
Victoria Monet, SWV, and so many others all in one weekend. It's like, how can you just can't even, you can't even imagine, how great that feels. And to know that you had a hand in planning such a major event. And it was the Essence Fest 30th anniversary. So what a way to celebrate.
Awesome. And I know that from your Instagram, again, stalking, you said that you were wearing you said that you were wearing Caribbean designers. So I knew that you had on some fabulous, vibrant outfits. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, for sure. So, I carry the Caribbean wherever I go. And that is something that I do very intentionally and very consciously. And so I wore some designs from Diane Carlton Style, which is a amazing brand out of Trinidad and Tobago. And I think, for me, there's not an Essence Fest without me wearing a Diane Carlton style piece. So just big up to Stacy and that beautiful brand, because the vibrancy, the colors, the one of a kind pieces that she custom makes for me year after year. Like, I just can't get over it. I'm so, so grateful and thankful. I also wore a brand out of Barbados called Pink Lemonade by Rochelle Paris. And Rochelle is not only an amazing fashion designer, she's also a great friend. So I think for me, being intentional, not only about wearing Caribbean designers, but also like showcasing the amazing women that I know, in different spaces. So to wear her designs at somewhere like Essence Festival was really amazing and really felt good. Always got to pick up the home team, Melissa Noel, a Guyanese designer. So I got, the opportunity to show off some of her amazing pieces as well. And then I supported a locally owned, Black-owned women's business here in the States, Meow and Bark Boutique, which is based in Florida. So I was very, very intentional about the pieces that I chose to wear, the brands I chose to support, and also to just bring that Caribbean flavor and vibrance and color with me wherever I go.
I know, and they were beautiful, vibrant
Thank you.
pieces. And it's really great that you're using your platform to showcase and highlight the work of not only just women, but Caribbean women. So congratulations on that, and keep doing it. So we're going to take things all the way back. All the way back. So unlike most of my guests, because everyone I've interviewed so far, they have been born in the Caribbean, but you were born in America. As a first generation Guyanese American, how has your dual heritage shaped your worldwide view and your personal identity, would you say?
I love this question because, for so long, growing up, I struggled with identity because on one end, you're not American enough because, you brought up with my Guyanese upbringing, the values, the culture, the food, the everything, right? And then on the other end, it's like, people will always say, if you're not born somewhere, you're not from there. But I will always say to people, where you're born or not born, right, does not dictate who you are, right? You can be born somewhere and have no connection to it, or you could be born somewhere else, and based on how you were brought up and the connections that you have, or the culture in which you are is instilled in you, that's what makes you who you are. And for me, I always say I had the best of both worlds. My time in Guyana, my time here in the US, they literally shaped the woman that I am today, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. My Guyanese values, my Guyanese manners, the food, the celebrations, just literally, it's at the core of who I am as a person. And I have such an unshakable confidence in the person that I am because of that dual identity, that I know exactly who I am. Nobody can ever make me feel less than. Nobody can ever make me feel as though I don't belong, right? In any sense of the word, in any room that I'm in. And that comes from that strong Caribbean identity that has been shaped and instilled in me literally from the time I could remember. My grandmothers, my mom, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, who always said, you are a child of Guyana, point blank, period. And everywhere you go, people should be proud to know that you're one of us, right? And so I think for anyone who may struggle with identity or who has a dual identity, I wear it as a badge of honor, because the way that I'm able to navigate spaces and move about and bring the lens that I have, I know it's unique. I know it's like unlike anything some have experienced. I know sometimes that people may feel threatened by that, or think like, who does she think she is? And for me, it's like, I'm that girl. Like, I know who I am, and I have this unshakable confidence because of the fact that the dual identity that I have was embraced, encouraged, and nurtured. It wasn't an either or, right? And I think it's as Caribbean people, especially, there's always this. I've met so many people who would tell their children, for years, you're not this, you're not that, you're American, blah, blah, blah. And then those same children grow up and now don't have the connections that you hope they have to their homeland. And
Mm-hmm.
then I've seen parents and grandparents then feel sorry or feel sad that there's not a connection, or there's not this love or this closeness to their homeland. And it's like, well, that has to be taught. Those are things that you can't tell somebody all their life. You're not from here. You have no rights to claim this. But then you have other groups of people who are literally like, they're like, this is your birthright. You're going to go and visit. You're going to have stake in this. And I think it's been a really big mistake of people who don't encourage and instill and nurture the fact that this is literally your roots and who you
Mm-hmm.
are and what makes you that person. And I've seen people regret that. And I am such the kind of person to say that should be encouraged, right? These
Yeah.
are the people that will end, because we're for a region that's so big on tourism, right? We look so much to certain groups of people to come in to spend their money. What about the people who have direct ties, that have the money, that want to invest, that have personal connections, but oftentimes so overlooked and undervalued? And for me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, I know I can be a voice because I see both sides. And I think that I know
Yeah.
that is unique. So I always would say, like, it's really important that is nurtured. And so because it was nurtured in me, like, I am that's why I feel like I have such a strong sense of self, and am so, both places are home,
Mm-hmm.
no one more than the other. And there's never a competition or you know, I have to choose. No, like, this is who I am, both sides of me. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I think it can sometimes be a double-edged sword, living in the diaspora per se, because on one hand, like you said, on one hand, you're not Guyanese because when you go to Guyana, they're telling you that you weren't born there. And then when you're in the USA, they're saying to you that you're not American because your parents are of Guyanese descent. So it is a double-edged sword. And I think sometimes parents may think that they're protecting their children by making
Mhm.
them ultra American, or, being a little bit more one-sided than the other. But
But
in the
you're
end, like you
really,
said, they become disconnected from who
yeah.
they are and their culture. So speaking of early beginnings, can you share your early inspirations and what or who sparked your interest in journalism and storytelling?
Yeah, and I just want to make another quick point there. We can't afford to lose lineage and identity and culture. And the quickest way to lose identity, to lose culture, to lose traditions is to tell children, or to tell children who are of heritage of these countries, that they don't belong, or you're not one of us. And then years later wonder why certain things were not passed down. Or what I hear all the time, oh gosh, this tradition dying, these young people don't want to learn. No, you haven't instilled that into
Yeah.
them, and it's like, you can't cuss me with one end and then expect me to come back on the next. So
Hmm.
I think it's a very delicate balance. I think there are a lot of people who are evolving now, and I'm happy to see that. But I think it has to continue, because we cannot complain about losing certain things if we're not teaching those things, and then expect people to grow up and somehow magically just want to be
Yeah.
a part of something. And I see it happen too often. So I'm just really glad that I can serve as a bridge, a bridge to that. And that bridge, I'll go right into the answer to your question, was my grandmother. Like, my grandmother is the reason why I became a journalist. My granny Laura, my mom's mom, God rest her soul, she used to have me go pick up Stabrook News from Joe's Market in New
I hear
Jersey.
the accent coming out as soon as you mentioned your
Joe's Joe
grandmother.
Joe's Market in New Jersey, where my family settled. My parents first settled in Jamaica, Queens, right? Queens
Mhm.
is like, is literally little Guyana. And my family settled in New Jersey. My grandmother used to go send me to pick up the Stabrook News just about once a week. And we would come home and I'd read the news with her, and I'd watch the news on TV, world news, like on ABC. I would watch that too. And honestly, just to see how she lit up to still know what was happening. What happened with the church, who dead, who this, who out, whatever it was. She was so excited. She was so happy, like, okay, well, I know what's happening. Okay. And I said, you know what? I want to do that. I want to keep people connected to the world around them. I want people to be able to pick up a piece of paper, read my words, and feel connected, to know what is happening, no matter if they're a mile away or 1,000 miles away. And I was probably like 10 years old at that point, and it stuck with me because I never forgot her face on a Friday afternoon when she was like, okay, I don't know what's happening home. I will know what's going on. And, at that time, it's the 90s. So, you would use a phone card to call for a couple minutes and just get a little information. So that gave her like this plethora of updates, without having to catch phone card, and call. And it was beautiful. And I loved it. And she would have me I was so proud to just sit down and read, like, Granny, let me tell you about this. Okay, let me tell you about that. And then if my grammar wasn't on point, she would stop me and she says, no, Miss Melissa, do that again. Like little things. And it just really helped develop such a love for storytelling. My grandmother's a great storyteller. I think all Caribbean people are great storytellers. Especially with the sound effects, the bladam and bradam and all those things, when you're telling something. I love that. So I developed a love for storytelling and also for using the spoken word or written word to keep people connected. I loved it.
Fantastic. And speaking of families, traditionally of West Indian families, they always encourage us to pursue the more conventional careers like being a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. So I know obviously your grandmother was very inspirational in helping you to establish your reason for doing what you do. But that still doesn't mean she wanted you to be a journalist. So how did your family support and influence your career choice, especially in those early days?
Yeah, so I was supposed to become a dermatologist by my parents' account and find the cure for eczema, which I had, growing up, had all these skin issues. So they're like, she's going to be a doctor. She's going to specialize in dermatology, the whole nine. Honestly, once I think, I was 10 years old when I used to read those papers of my grandmother. And I think my parents may have thought that, okay, she into that for now, but, things will change. But then when I got into my teens and I'm asking my mom to enter these writing competitions and I'm writing for the school newspaper and I'm telling her, I got into this like journalism program for, I think it was New Jersey Institute of Technology and Rutgers University had this like pre-college program and I got into this like writing program and I was so excited. And then I'm telling her, okay, I want to go to Howard University and I want to study journalism. And she's like, oh, like, you're serious? Like, you really want to do this thing? And I'm like, yes, yeah. I really want to do this. So they were like, okay, if that's what you really want to do, like, go and do it, but just figure out like figure out what would be your fallback. Like if you didn't get this big news job, would you be able to go use those skills for something else? So what I did was I did a mixture of like journalism and public relations because, I could always go work for a PR firm or those skills are transferable. So I made sure I had the PR skills. I was doing my journalism. And I also did Caribbean studies because I said, okay, well, if I'm doing that and I'm also interested in international news, I'm interested in foreign service, maybe, I was just trying to do all the things. So once I told my parents that, okay, I'm thinking this through, I know that I'll have skills in multiple things. They said, all right, let the girl study her thing, let her do her thing. But I will say that after I finished school, they still were worried because in their minds, it's like, well, you get your degree, where's the money? But the journalism industry is one of those industries where you can either break through really quickly or it could take you many years to get that breakthrough. And I was the latter. Like it took me quite a while to figure it out and like make good money. And I think that's what worried. Like, it's like, is she going to be okay? But they still supported. They always supported. They just always were like, but are you okay though? I think that was their like big thing.
So after convincing your parents, you actually managed to attend Howard University, which was your
Yes,
dream.
my dream
So
school.
can you share some of the pivotal moments from your time there that would have significantly shaped your career in journalism?
Yeah, from the time I walked into Howard University, God bless that school and just what they instill in you. Like, no matter what you study, you are taught that you are not only a leader for yourself, but a leader for the global Black community, right? That's instilled in you, whether you are in a English class, math class, sociology class, you will learn about Black mathematicians, you will learn about Black sociologists, you will learn about Black thought leaders. And I valued that about Howard so much because nowhere else in the world made me feel as proud of like being a Black woman and knowing that it's okay for me to take up space in the world and that I have something so amazing to offer. So from the time I got in the door as a freshman, I remember I started in radio. I hosted the Island Hoppin' Show every Monday and
Nice.
Wednesday, 2 to 4 p.m. And they let me shine, Like I remember being a freshman interviewing Damian Marley before he had a
Nice.
big performance in Washington, D.C. at this club. I'll never forget Crossroads. To this day, I still remember that concert. I got to like interview soca artists, reggae artists, interview thought leaders that came to our Ralph Bunch International Affairs Center. It really gave me the space to hone my craft, to learn. And then we had a huge Caribbean Students Association. So working with the executive board there and, meeting people who, who, whether they were like me and they have these dual identities, who spent some time back home, but then grew up mostly in the States. And then you have people who grew up all their lives in the Caribbean. And we had these experiences and we brought them together. So I got to shine with Caribbean Students Association. And then in the journalism space, we were in Washington, D.C. Like I was interning on Capitol Hill. I got to intern for major news stations. I was a White House correspondence scholar and was honored by, former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. And that was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I cannot believe this is happening. Not only are you recognized for your work, but like by the president. And so
That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. So there were so many moments that Howard instilled in you like sense of self, sense of identity, and that that your success is not your success alone, but that of your community. And I think that mindset is so important no matter what field you work in. And then also it was where I feel like that my unshakable confidence in my Caribbean identity really, really grew because I got to be around my like Caribbean people every day. I got to learn. I got to, it was the point too, is defending yourself like, no, you can't tell me who I am, that part too. But at the same time, I developed some of the best friendships. Some of my best friends, are from Jamaica, are from Trinidad, are from Barbados. And those friendships developed sitting under the Caribbean tree at 1:00 in the afternoon on a Friday, cricket playing across the yard as a DJ, literally a DJ under the tree, DJing, or it's, Independence Day for Trinidad and Tobago, and there's doubles and Polori, and we're doing a flag raising and singing the national anthem and just celebrate. It's just like, you cannot recreate something like that if you tried. It was just so authentic and even though so real, so magical at the same time. People were like, wait, there was a DJ underneath a tree called the Caribbean tree. I was like, yes, if you go to Howard University right now, you will see the tree with all the flags in the tree and the little plaque that has a little dedication thing that says, this is the Caribbean tree. And I think for me, it's like, those are moments that help you to understand that your place in the world is special. And you have a group of people who are special, and that's Caribbean people. And I always knew for me, no matter where I went in the world, I was going to tell our stories in all the different facets, in all the different forms that it came in. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to do it yet, but from the Howard experiences, it allowed me to do that. And I think also, there's an organization called the Howard University International PALS. And what we did there was we were like the mentors and the big brother, big sisters for international students coming to the US for the first time to study. So I learned so much about like, you know, visas and the whole like process and administration. And I made so many friends in that organization. I served as public relations officer. So I got to hone those PR journalism skills. We were literally doing concerts with major Caribbean celebrities as like 19 and 20-year-olds. And I think back sometimes and I'm like, did we really have Wyclef on campus? Did we really do this thing with Marsha Montano? Yes, we did. And it just, now when people see my articles for Essence and I write and they're like, oh my gosh, you made me feel like I was there, or you write from such a knowledgeable place, or a place like you could tell like you're a fan too. It's because I am. It's because these are things I've spent many, many years learning or just enjoying. And now I actually get to just bring that across, you know, on these platforms. And it's so fun for me. Like I absolutely love it. Like I wrote a piece about Castaban that came out a couple of days ago. And, you know, they had a historic concert, first time soca music was ever at Central Park Summer Stage. And Castaban literally has been around for almost 20 years. And I feel like I grew up with them. I was starting college, you know, at that point in time. And somebody wrote to me saying like, I'm sure you don't need me to tell you this, but that piece was amazing. And as a fan, I really felt like you told their story and that you really got it. And I was like, because I'm a fan too, you know, like I'm not just coming peering from the outside looking in. I'm following the music. I love the music. I grew up in this music. So I write from a place of experience, but I also write from a place of like love and just wanting people to have their shine and our stories to really like pop whenever they're told. So I
guess you have a really authentic voice, because as opposed to someone who is just doing it because it's their job or they've been placed in the role, you have a passion for what you're doing. It's something that you grew up dreaming about doing. And I think that Howard University was probably the perfect place to kickstart your career. But guys, we are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back shortly after this. So guys, if you are just tuning in now, you are tuned into Women of the West Indies. And this afternoon, I am sitting down with the fabulous Melissa Noel. And so far, she's been telling us about her childhood, growing up, you know, with dual nationality in New York and heading off to Howard. And now we're going to jump into the early days of her career. So we spoke about all the fantastic experiences that you had along the way, Mel, which sounded absolutely fantastic and amazing. But what were some of the first experiences as a reporter once you stepped out into the real world, and how did they influence the way that you approach your journalism today?
Yeah, I mean, so I started my career on the assignment desk at ABC News, working overnight for about 2.5 years. And it was just really, really, I faced a lot of challenges, whether it was working overnights, not feeling seen, dealing with, pushback and some racism in the industry, in different roles. It was challenging, but it also showed me what I want to do, but it also taught me what I don't want to do. And what I mean by that is I knew that I wanted to report. I knew that I was meant for bigger than just kind of following the traditional path of working in local news and then working my way up. But I just wasn't sure yet how to do it. And it became one of those things where I decided that I was going to go in a different way, that I was going to carve out my own path. I was going to tell these Caribbean stories. And even though I didn't necessarily know how, I knew that I was going to figure it out. I was always taught that you had to follow this rubric and go one way in news. And I think once I decided that I didn't necessarily have to do that to be successful, that's when the game changed for me. That's when things got better. That's when I was able to evolve. That's when I was able to grow. And to actually, for me, to really do the most impactful work is when I recognized that instead of continuing to ask for permission to tell these stories, that I just had to pick up and do it. And so after about 2.5 years at ABC News, and I went to grad school, did a master's, that whole thing, which was great. I decided that if I was going to tell these stories, I had to be in the region. I had to do something a little different. I had to shake things up a bit. And so in 2014, that's what I decided to do. I worked part-time at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, where I did my master's, and I was freelancing, and I just picked up, and I was going to the Caribbean, and I was telling stories, and it was hard. It wasn't easy. I made a lot of mistakes. I wasn't necessarily making the big bucks that I had hoped that I would. So there was a lot of struggle there. I saw a lot of friends who, they were either getting their apartments or buying houses or doing other things. And here I was just still trying to figure out the business side of journalism and really how can I make this work for me? And so I struggled with that because, you're trying to figure did I make the right move? But I knew that there was something bigger out there for me. I knew there was more if I would just stick with it. So I picked up, I went to the region. I would do, stories back and forth. I would spend a lot of my own money, or I would stay with some of those friends that I mentioned that I made in college or with family. And I just was figuring it out as I go. And then I learned the business side of the industry. And that took a while, though. Journalism school does not teach you the business side of the industry at all. I hope it's changing now. And I would say it's changing a bit, but after I learned the business side of things and I got the opportunity to start writing Caribbean stories locally in New York City for an outlet called Voices of New York, and then for NBC Black, which was a vertical of NBC News that focused on Black stories in the diaspora, I had an editor who was really supportive, and I just started to travel and tell these stories. Grenada, Curacao, Barbados, St. Vincent, Montserrat, you name it. I was
yes.
Then I also, television opportunities opened up for me, and I started to freelance for One Caribbean TV, CBS Puerto Rico, and the rest is history. I started to use that information that I learned in terms of the business side, negotiating contracts, negotiating things like that, and also just taking that passion, the learning the business, and then also having these great relationships with editors. And I just started saying, hey, I'm your go-to girl for all things Caribbean. Reach out to me, let me know. So between the mix of doing television in the region, writing for these, other publications in mainstream US news, it really started to take off. But it was a long process, where others may have been on their third promotion or, third station, because you move up news markets when you're in television. Here I was okay, well, if I could get this contract for these 6 months or this year, it was very different. And so that was a struggle too. And that's what it made me say, I have to really formalize a business and really be able to grow it and use what I have, not only as a journalist and media professional, to grow and to scale, but also so that I can have impact more than anything. So I can have impact.
Fantastic. And as usual, as soon as things started to pick up for you, we were all faced with the dreaded COVID-19 pandemic. So what would you say are some of the challenges you faced during that period, and how did you navigate through them to rebuild your career?
So my career wasn't, I would say two things. The pandemic is what really pushed me to another level. So yes, I was reporting in the Caribbean. I was spending a lot of time in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Barbados working. And the pandemic literally, just to be very blunt, all of my contracts dried up, the Caribbean and the rest of the world, right? But just particularly speaking to the Caribbean as a tourism dependent region, travel ceased to exist for such a long time. So I couldn't travel. And I couldn't travel. So that meant that those contracts that I had, advertising budgets were cut. So that means that my budget was cut and all of my contracts were gone. And it was a very, very hard pill to swallow, because you work so hard, you feel like it's tough for your game, everything is happening, and then it all ceases to exist. And I had to, literally like kind of take stock of what was happening. So that was a period that I went through a deep, deep sadness, right? I think all of us did. It's like you're struggling with like, why is this happening? How, what did I do wrong kind of thing. You're hoping for the best. So two things happened. After my contracts were no longer existent, I did have to apply for, what did they have at the time? PPP loans here in the States as a small business owner, so I could keep myself afloat. So that was a big blow, because you're like, okay, I'm finally starting to make this money and now it's gone. So that was one thing. And that's real, because at the end of the day, all of us, you want the best for yourself, and you have to keep coming on. It was hard to come on the air before the contracts, ended, but it was hard to keep coming on the air every day and giving updates on this, and me sitting there like, is my job going to survive this? That was tough. And I always feel like we should be real about those things, because it's not all roses at all. So that was hard. And then when it did happen, I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? So it forced me to pivot. And so instead of, being on your television screens every day, I started to produce what was virtual programming, right? Virtual programming became huge. We were doing concerts online. We were
I was doing the same thing
online. We were doing everything. And so I took on like freelance gigs as a producer for those online events. I also was hosting virtually, which became such a huge thing. We had whole award shows virtually, right? So I took it as an opportunity to really grow. And then on top of that, I said, you know what, let me get even more serious about like my intellectual property. I trademarked Destination Diaspora, which is a travel series and brand that I worked on. So I got that trademarked. I built out Mel&N Media and the services that, we offer a little bit bigger and better. And I really was able to just slow down and take stock of like what I really wanted and where I wanted to be. And as much as the pandemic took away from me, it's also what brought me my role at Essence. Well, at least the starting of working with Essence, because I did a piece on how Caribbean people, the fight against, I think it was called The Fight Against Racism as a Caribbean Fight Too. And I was looking at how Caribbean leaders, young leaders in the Caribbean, were reacting to the murder of George Floyd, and how they were calling for colonial statues on different islands to be taken down. It was the Bahamas, and it was Barbados, and it was folks in Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago. And I did this story, and that story ended up winning an international award from National Association of Black Journalists. And that's what started my relationship with Essence. I was like, you guys need this story. You need to hear this side of it. And I started to freelance for them. And that freelancing, after about 8 months, turned into, I was a contributing writer. And then from there, I was offered a contributing editor's role. And it's 3 years, 3 years later. And I'm still, still there, still rocking with them, having done, so many things under the Essence Ventures brand that I'm really proud of all these years later. So I tried to look at that time as time that I needed to reset, time that I needed to reevaluate, and also that it's okay sometimes to be pushed into a different direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they say. Like sometimes in life, it's not about what happens to you, but how you deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think that you, rather than, feeling, I'm sure you had your moments of feeling.
Oh no, definitely. Let me tell you.
But that also made you focus more on yourself and focus more on your business. I think like you said, you trademarked your diaspora program, and obviously you spent more time working on Mel&N Media.
Yeah.
So speaking of Mel&N Media, you like to invest in local Caribbean talent as well as part of your brand. Why is it so important for you to help to establish the region's media landscape?
Yeah, because I have seen, after having worked in the region now for over a decade, and I can't believe that so much time has passed already. just knowing that sometimes knowing that it's not for lack, it's never for a lack of talent. Sometimes there's just the lack of opportunity. And I think that it's really important to create pathways and opportunities for talented people who just need someone to say yes. Yes to trainings, yes to opportunities, yes to scholarships, yes to just taking time. And so that is critical to me because I see myself and so many people that I've worked with, have gotten to meet story-wise. I see my family, in them. And so it's critical for me to do my part to ensure that there are more opportunities than some of my family had, or more opportunities for people that look like me, especially in a region that is so near and dear to my heart. So I think it's not only something that is close to my heart, but honestly, I feel like as a Caribbean American journalist, it's a responsibility that I have, right? You have a responsibility to not only do well and look good and have all these accolades and all that good stuff. It's important that you hold the door open for somebody else. Like
Absolutely.
you have to do that because people held the door open for me. People gave me opportunities. People trusted in me, or people said, you know what, this young girl, okay, she good. Let me give her a chance. And I think it's paramount that we do that for other people. So I will always be a champion of that. And it's just like, for instance, in January, I had the opportunity to be in Nevis with the Island Girls Rock. They have a really amazing Bloom Where You're Planted mentorship program. And I got to go to Nevis and stay there and mentor young women for their writing workshop. And it was like, those are the moments that make me feel like, okay, like I'm doing something really good, because to give up, when you can give up your time and try to inspire other women and other people in general from where you come from, and where your people come from, I think that's more important than anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even in your role as the contributing news and politics editor at Essence magazine, how do you ensure that Caribbean African diaspora stories receive the attention and representation that they deserve on a global scale?
Yeah, so first I have to say I have a supportive team. Our vice president of content, Nandi Howard, she's and my former senior editor, Malika Jabali. They know not only the skills that I have as a journalist, and as an international correspondent, and like my hard skills, whether it's multimedia and the kind of reporting that I do, but they also value the lens that I have as a Caribbean American storyteller. So when I'm coming to them with pitches, and I mean there are many, they hear them out, they listen to me. And I think, it's about being in the room, because if I wasn't in the room, sometimes it's not for lack of wanting to do it, but because I'm plugged in to these communities, I would know that this is happening and that's going on, or this is coming up, or hey, we should pay attention to this. And so one, I thank them for always being open to it, but then two, it's about ensuring that more of us are in these spaces, because it shouldn't just be me, on this one team. It should be, so many of us across different spaces who have these lenses, these identities, these dual heritages, right? To be able to say, this is why this is going to matter to our audience, or this is why our audience should know about this, because this is important, or this is how we are connected as a global Black diaspora. But if we don't tell this story, people wouldn't know that. And I go into every meeting with that lens. I go into every meeting and say, hey, it's important that we cover this because X, or this would be a good way to show how Black people across the diaspora are working together. And I think it's so critical to have leaders who listen, who champion you. And I'm grateful for that at Essence, like so much. I don't think they really understand how grateful I am that they value that and they listen to me, but then also just knowing that there has to be so much more of that and so many more of us in these spaces, for sure.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for a fantastic conversation so far, Mel. Like I'm just here
Oh,
with my
thank
mouth
you.
open, like it's so much valuable information that you're sharing. And I hope all the young journalists out there are listening in and taking inspiration. But we're going to be right back after this quick break. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Women of the West Indies so far. If you are just tuning in, my name is Vernaire Bass and I'm the host. And today I'm sitting down with the fantastic Melissa Noel. So far, we've been speaking about her company, Mel&N Media, her work at Essence Magazine, and the importance of giving back and really nurturing the future journalists of the Caribbean. One of the series that you also have, you mentioned your diaspora series, but you also have a series called Love It in a Barrel, which addressed the mental health impact of parental migration on Caribbean children. What inspired you to focus on this topic, and what has been the response from the community? Because I can speak as someone who was forced to migrate to the UK because of our volcano. So when I saw that you did that, that was very interesting for me. Why did you decide to focus on that particular topic?
Yeah, so I thank you so much for that question. I actually met a Barbadian filmmaker, Lisa Harewood, in about, I think this was 2017, and she had a short film called Auntie. And in the film, it told the story of a young girl whose mom migrated to England, and she was left in the care of a neighbor who was, like auntie, uncle, that kind of thing. And then when her mom sent for her, I think it was about 6 or 7 years later, it showed how fraught the relationship was between her and her mom once they reunited, because, it had been so many years they were apart, but then also how that weighed on the woman who had then taken care of her child for 7 years. So I went to this film screening in Brooklyn, New York. And after that screening, people were talking about it. And I met 2 young women who said, that story is my story. And I said, well, what do you mean? One woman said that her mom migrated from Trinidad and came to New York. And when they were reunited about 10 years later, just how distant they were and how they didn't know each other, and how she had all this resentment, but she never talked about it because she didn't want to seem ungrateful. But how now she struggles with trust, and she sees how it has manifested now that she has her own children, and how she doesn't have a close relationship with her mom. It's more so with her grandmother, who did end up raising her. And so I said, well, if she has this story, and I know so many people who had to migrate, or their parents had to migrate and leave them behind, I wonder how it has impacted them. So that kind of took me on a journey where I started interviewing people. Lisa Harewood had interviewed people as well who had gone through this experience, and audio recordings. They share their experiences. And then what I wanted to do with what I was looking at from a reporting standpoint was, what mental health impact did this have on people, particularly in Caribbean communities where mental health is typically something that is very taboo.
Taboo, yes.
Don't talk about it. You keep your business in the house. You don't tell nobody nothing, that kind of thing. And I said, you know what? I want to tackle this because there's so many people who are struggling with this. And what it turned into was, I applied for a grant from the Pulitzer Center and from International Centers for Journalists. And that grant allowed me to travel to Jamaica. I met the Jamaican sociologist, Dr. Claudette Crawford Brown, who had coined the term barrel children, who had done, she's been doing work with families longer than I've been alive, 30 plus, 30 something years.
Because I was going to say, sorry to cut you, that must be the story of so many people whose parents would have moved with the Windrush generation.
Absolutely. And so one thing that she made very clear is, not because somebody's parent migrates and they're left behind in the care of family members, that doesn't make them a barrel child, because they can still have a really good relationship with their parent or parents. What makes a child a barrel child is when they lack that emotional connection or emotional bond to their parent or parents who has migrated, and that causes the friction. So what I did was I worked on a series. At that time, I was with NBC News. And again, like, I'm really grateful to supportive editors. My former editor, Amber Payne, championed the Love in a Barrel series on NBC Black. And what we did was I think we spent about a month in Jamaica. We spent time in Miami. We were in New York. We spent some time in Trinidad and Tobago, following the stories of people who were either, left behind, and they currently at that time, hadn't seen their parent or parents for a number of years, or, it's been like that their entire lives, or it's people who had just reunited and they were trying to rebuild their relationships. And it taught me so much about family, about mental health, about, a parent's love, because at the end of the day, parents were doing this because they wanted the best for their families and the best for children. And this was unfortunately sometimes an unintended consequence of that. And not only were we able to tell stories of people who sometimes never spoke to their parents about this, like never brought it up whatsoever, 25, 30 years, just didn't want to seem ungrateful, and actually felt enough courage to do it after sharing their story with us or sharing their story with great people like Lisa Harewood, who's from Barbados. What we were able to do is create a community engagement around it. So I worked with University of Southern California, their Center for Health Reporting, got a community engagement grant, and we were able to do some events I think it was two events in New York City, where we had Caribbean films on the topic, including Lisa's films. So we have films from Barbados and Guyana and Martinique, and one other Caribbean country that really spoke to this. Oh, and Grenada as well, Scars of a Mother's Dreams by Mashida Phillip. We were able to show those films. We were able to bring Dr. Brown up from Jamaica to discuss her work with families and how there's ways to mitigate, this impact if we work ahead of time and not be ashamed about it, and, have these discussions, prepare children for the transition and the change, and not just like hush it down, don't say nothing, that kind of thing. So with that, we were able to have like Caribbean counselors who are based in the US to work with some of the families who had just reunited in New York City. We were also able to share resource information that Dr. Brown had worked on for many years at the University of the West Indies. And out of that came two things. She was able to get funding and create the a migration institute at the University of the West Indies in a Mona campus in Jamaica.
Nice.
And then we were able to present this to the United Nations, where they were voting and planning out migration policy. And that was the first time that Caribbean stories and migration issues were included in that particular report at that time. So I think it was, to this day, I'm still in awe of how me just saying, hey, I want to know more about that, because I know, like, I have family members who this is their experience. I know people who, I have friends that this was their experience. How did it impact them? And understanding that, some people may be uncomfortable because, this is a hard topic, especially because we don't talk about mental health, but understanding that it could really help as well. And so I'm really proud of the work that we got to do with that series. It's something I certainly want to revisit. I keep saying, like, I have to revisit and work on something again in life, but no, I really, really do. Because it's not like migration is going to end. But it's something that's just a part of life for a lot of people, but just making it into, or just having the tools and the resources available to families so that it's a smoother process, or so that they keep more in contact, or so that parents are able to think about some of the impact it can have. And then also to really shine a light on the really broken immigration systems that exist. It should not take 12 and 15 years for a parent to have their child join the in the
Mm-hmm.
US, in the UK, or in Canada. And particularly speaking to the US system, which is the one I know the best, it's, it's 15 years, 15 years, and that's
That's
like
hard.
13 to 15 years is an average. So you'll literally miss the lifetime of your children growing up. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes within that process, while you're waiting for certain paperwork to come through, you cannot leave the country. And then you're trying to make money and your children may not be able to get the visa to come up here. There's just so many things. So
Absolutely.
it was just a really important series. And what just sparked it was meeting those women at that film screening and
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, we need to talk about this. And I think for anybody who's a storyteller, sometimes the things that you may think are not a big deal or aren't, people wouldn't be interested in this or whatever. Sometimes I think it's important to follow those because
Absolutely.
there are important stories within those things that you may think are small. They're really important stories there and they really do matter. And I think, the more and more we know that the stories of our community, no matter how small you think they may be, that they matter, I think the more we're able to have like impactful change in some way, for sure.
Fantastic. So my last question before we bring this conversation to a close because we're running out of time. Looking back on your career so far, what do you hope will be your lasting impact on journalism and the representation of the Caribbean and the African diaspora?
I think the biggest compliments that the things that always stick out to me is when someone says, I knew that was a Melissa Noel piece before I looked at the byline. That is the biggest compliment that anybody could give me, because then that means I've made my stamp and my mark. So people know that there's quality, there's care, there's nuance, and then there's a lens with which you knew that I was intentional about making sure that that story made its way onto an Essence or a National Geographic or an NBC or an ABC. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's it for sure.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. Like there was so much in this conversation. I'm gonna have so many sound bites to take away. If you can recommend a guest to be on the show, who would it be and why?
Oh my gosh, I know so many great women of the West Indies. This is tough.
Give me a
Um,
few. It could be more than
okay.
one.
So I would say Shola K. Roberts, who is the founder of the Dance Grenada Festival. She's a dancer, she's a choreographer. She is currently finishing up her PhD at Columbia University. And when I see and when I think about what Shola has done, she saw a need in Grenada to have a festival to not only highlight dance, but also to promote dance education at the university level, and to be really instrumental in ensuring that dancers and the creative arts in general are taken seriously, not only in Grenada, but throughout the Caribbean region as a serious career, a career that you can make a living off of and, take care of your family. And that there's real attention paid to the creative arts and spaces for the creative arts. So she started the festival. This is the 5th year anniversary, so I think she would be amazing. I think
Fantastic.
also, yeah, she's fantastic, and I've had the honor of working with the festival now since its inception. So just really proud of the work that she's done, and to see how it's evolved. And just last year, the Grenadian government did launch its Office of Creative Affairs. And so to see her, being able to have impact where that is concerned, to be a part of the first conference that they have, to have now scholarship recipients attend Dance Grenada and and get scholarships from the Office of Creative Affairs. It's just like, what a full circle moment. It's fantastic. The other person I would say, Dr. Nicole Grimes, who is the founder of the Carib Biz Network, and that network and that community that she's created of Caribbean business leaders and creatives has been something that has given so many of us a voice and a platform, a space to network, and to also to scale up our businesses in a really fantastic way. And she's from Trinidad and Tobago. So those two ladies have
Fantastic.
been amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing those two fantastic future guests of the Wow Show. If you can share their details, that'll be absolutely fabulous
Absolutely.
as well. Thank you so much for sharing your fantastic story. I wish we had more than an hour. I had so many more questions to ask, but you're such a fantastic storyteller. I just enjoyed listening to you the whole time. So thank you very much for sharing everything that you have during this conversation. Guys, if you have been stuck with us so far, thank you so much for tuning in. And I hope that you found some gems in all the stories that Melissa was able to share. Up next week, I'll be interviewing the director of the UE, which is University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, Dr. Irasila Joseph. This will be in line with the 29th anniversary of the Soufriere Hills eruption here in Montserrat. So thank you so much again, Melissa, and thank you to everybody for your eyes and ears this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.